In this video, I'm going to take you through the creation of a painting of 3 capybaras, super large rodents. I'm going to use watercolor and gouache in a new technique that I haven't used before. I'll also talk about some of the recent work I've created, and there may be a few bonus images in here as well. So I'm beginning by getting the paper really wet with this big flat brush I've got here. This is a synthetic brush. And the line drawing was created using a unipin marker, so that's water resistant ink, so I don't have to worry about that going anywhere. And this is A4 mixed media paper. So I'm just grabbing a round mop brush. And so the plan for this is to, as mentioned, paint these animals in watercolor in a rather different way. So I've got my little watercolor kit here. I'm just grabbing what looks to be some lemon yellow. Okay, now I'm just going to blast some of that. Looks like I've picked up a little bit of red somewhere off the palette. I'm going to blast that all across these animals. Notice I'm completely ignoring the drawing that I've done, and this is the first part of this new technique I'm trying, or new to me. So now I've got a little bit of alizarin crimson there left on the palette, or it might be cad red actually. So we'll grab a little bit of that. Looks like there's a bit of, possibly a bit of orange in there as well, from my last trip to the beach using this. So everything's still super wet. Now I intended to leave a little bit more plain white paper showing than I have, but not to worry. We'll grab a little bit more of that red, a little bit of that orange, and then we'll grab some of the blue we've got here. It doesn't really matter too much. I just want a darker color. So let's imagine the light's coming in from the left. So we'll put some dark color there on. I don't know why I made the whoop noise. That was completely unnecessary. But we'll put some dark color down the right hand side of this guy. And everything is still, really wet on the paper. And perhaps come back in with a bit more orange and red. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? That's kind of like that. Perhaps it's a little bit of a hard edge, which isn't quite what I'm after. So let's move that out over there, sweep that across. And I think I'm going to leave that there to dry now. Okay, so I'm going to let it dry completely. So this is the beginnings of a little plein air. Well, I say plein air. I was sat in the car on the seafront at Exmouth. And this was painted with my little Inktense travel set that I used just the other week on the channel for the painting of the Imperial State Crown. So this one isn't finished yet. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to finish it. I can't quite make up my mind. I think I probably will, but the sky I'm very happy with. As you can see, I put in some very loose washes to indicate the distant hills, the distant beach and the sea and the sand in the foreground here. Left some gaps of white which may become waves, well, that was the intention here, lapping into shore. Then there was a guy with a kiteboard, as there often is down at Exmouth, and he was just hanging on to it and it was up in the air. I've kind of unintentionally exaggerated the length of the lines on the kiteboard here, but I think for dramatic and artistic license I can get away with that. I was thinking of making this a bright yellow or pink, and then the idea was to have loads of belties, one of the repeated motifs that have been cropping up in my work of late, that I really enjoy including in unusual environments. And I may add many more, sort of just disappearing off into the distance, off across the water. We'll see how that one goes. But I was just creating the cattle from my imagination. So there's that. And then, at the time, I wasn't overly happy with the belties, but looking at them again, I don't think they're too bad. It's just one of the things when you paint from your imagination, you have to sort of think, am I getting that, close enough? Now, when you're at Exmouth, there are often on the seafront, loads of people walking past, people on skateboards and scooters, electric bikes, and so on and so forth. So on the previous one, I wetted the paper quite a lot to create the initial washes and have nice soft edges, and I think it's come up with some nice effects. But with this one, I just went in with the water brush, and just went in on dry paper. Pretty happy with this one. One of the disadvantages of the water brush is that you can't, drench the paper using the water in the handle unless you kind of do it beforehand. So on this first sketch, before I put any colour down on the paper, I just went in with the water brush, squeezing the button to dampen the entire paper. Then I came back in with colour. With this one, just colour straight onto dry paper. But I like the looseness and the weird patterns in the sky. So these are all very much inspired by being down at Exmouth seafront rather than trying to depict Exmouth seafront. So you can see I've got a guy in a hoodie here, just walking along towards us. Then there's a couple, and then I've got a mother and child, and then I've stuck a black cow on a skateboard here, as you do, just peeking out from behind this other couple. There's a little hint of a wall inspired by the seawall, and then the lampposts on the seafront. I like the look of those. But one of the things I like about this is the looseness and how little I've described in places. So, for example, the bottom half of this lady, her face, this little child, part of the legs and the hands, completely, it's not really there, but to me it still says mother and child. I haven't even bothered with the feet on this couple. This guy is more completely resolved, but obviously no faces anywhere. And then the colours, I just came in with the blue, and I thought, well, I'll make the right hand side shadow, and then I'll pick out some bright bits with yellow, and then I originally put a couple of little flashes of red across here and here, and I showed it to my wife, who was sat next to me in the car, and she said, well, I like it, but the red is distracting and it looks like this guy's bleeding, which, I think she had a point. It did look like there was a trickle of blood going down the guy's torso, which wasn't, quite the plan. So I came in on top of that red with some ultramarine blue. And then for the next one, still inspired by the people, I thought, well, I'll free things up even further. So I added, a much wetter coat of sky. Not, so the first two, this sky was very much inspired by the weather on the day, as was the sky in this one. But for this one, I was just having some fun with some colour. So I still had blue on my brush, I think, or perhaps in the palette. So I just kept it super wet, so you get these blooms and little, little rings and patterns and so on, and there's a bit of purple in there as well. So I did that, and then once that was dry, I just went in with the Unipin marker, and I think I actually started with this guy. Then this couple. Now, one of the things when people are walking, you've got to make quick decisions, because, even if you spot them coming off in the distance, especially at the seafront, not only are they walking and moving, as they perhaps would be anyway, but they're looking off in different directions. They stop and look at the sea. They look back away from the coast. And then in a very quick time, they're often past you. So here, you see, I started with this lady in a hood, carrying some kind of bag, and she was holding some kind of walking stick. And then I don't think this guy was with her, but he ended up getting kind of mingled within the loose drawing. So they kind of blur together, but I quite liked that effect, so I went with that. And then there was a lady pointing off at the coast. There was somebody with her, but I didn't depict that. And then I thought, well, the sky's dry. I'm going to come in and continue with this theme. So there's a guy here, a little kid looking out up at the sky, the top of a woman, chap walking his dog, and then this one. I actually really like the line work on this one. It's a girl in a hoodie looking to the left. So you've got and she was actually on the beach, not on the seafront. So there's the silhouette of her profile with a little ponytail, the side of her hood, her torso, and then some squiggles for the legs. A squiggly lamppost again, I kind of like the way that's worked out, so that's well defined, but then squiggle, 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 left, right, some straight lines, more squiggles, and to me it still says lamppost. No feet here, no feet here. Just came in with some colours, more or less, where I wanted. Red to make this guy stand out. A bit left on the brush, so partially filled in the baseball cap. Added a bit to the bag. Then in with the yellow, bit of a pattern on the shirt. Some yellow ochre on the exposed flesh. And that's more or less it for the colours. Bit of blue just to key it in, tie it in with the upper half. And then this one, the thing that attracted me to start this one was this couple walking along. The guy, they were coming past me really fast. I got about 10 seconds in to sort of use them as reference. But it was the fact he had, I don't know whether it's from McDonald's or somewhere, but it's one of those drink containers where there's like a domed plastic top and a straw coming out. And then she had her hand around his upper arm. So I was able to capture his posture fairly quickly, and then hers as well. And then I kind of made up the cap and the glove. Beard and hair and tash always help just kind of define a head. Put this couple in very loosely, just to give a little bit of a sense of environment and depth to the drawing. And then somebody was coming along on a bike, so I put down the absolute minimum I could for that bike rider. A few swathes of colour for the sky, partly inspired by the sky down there, in general. But then what I did was I kept the washes on the people super clean. So this was basically one application of paint, shumph, little line of blue there, which was left over from the shumph on the companion. And then for the guy and the girl in the main couple, same technique, just a smooth application of paint. If it starts to bubble or cauliflower, that's fine, but it's just one hit. One hit with the red, one with the green, one with the yellow ochre, keeping the left side of the faces light. And then this kind of browny purple, starting to get a bit of dry brush, but shump, shump, and then shump for the legs, going beyond the line work of the pen to correct the length of the legs on the woman, but it also helps add a sense of movement. So, I haven't really drawn any legs there, but I don't know, there's something I like about the way the guy's kind of curving. He's sort of leaning a bit. I kind of feel, when I look at that one, I feel they're walking towards me. And then just a little bit of blue on the biker, not too much. And then I signed it there as I have with all of these. But the date I often try to hide, so I put 22 in Roman numerals, XX11 for 2022. But for this one, I thought, well, I'll just put it kind of along the ground, at sort of a little perspective line, as if that's the direction the bike's kind of coming towards us. So there are those quick studies. So now that layer of watercolour is dry, my plan is to fill in the background. So I've switched to a small flat brush, and I'm actually coming in here with gouache. This is a mixture of permanent white and ultramarine blue, I think. And I haven't used this type of paint very much, really. So that's part of the reason I'm using it. I used it in combination with watercolour for an impressionist cafe scene a few weeks ago, a rather longer demo than the one I'm doing here today. But the point of this little experiment really was just to sort of see what effects we can get on the fur and the hair of these animals if we sort of completely ignore the fact you've got lines there, or pretty much anyway. And thereby you've got sort of total freedom with your watercolor. You don't have to worry about trying to control it, which you can't with watercolor anyway, of course. But this paint is covering really quite nicely and producing a nice matte finish. So then, having been wild and free with the watercolor, now I can define these outlines, and I'm not being too fussy about it. If I am going over my line work here and there, usually not intentionally, but I'm not too worried about that. We can always modify the line work in a bit. But the point is, because this is going down as a nice matte uniform layer, it provides a nice contrast in terms of the very free and loose watercolor layer that we put down first. Now I need to just switch to a small round brush for some of these, because although I'm not too worried about the line work I've done, I want to capture some of the character that I achieved in the drawing. So by using the little round brush, I can kind of go in between some of the marks I made to maintain the sort of fluffy texture of the edge of the animal. Now the nose of this little guy on the right here, I don't feel I've got that quite the right shape to capture the sort of essence of the capybara. And I actually don't have the reference in front of me anymore, so I'm going to make a little adjustment in a moment from memory and from my imagination. I'll probably try to simulate the shape of the one on the left here. I seem to remember that I was rather happier with that one. I need to fill in this little bit here as well. So I'm going to kind of make it a little more downward sloping. Make it a little shorter perhaps. And to be honest with you, that's part of another reason I kind of wanted to try this little experiment. I wanted to see how well I could correct over the top of this ink with the gouache. I think from memory that's made it a bit better, and I'll come in and fine-tune it in a bit. Obviously I need to correct the nostrils and stuff now. And then I think what I'm going to do next is switch back to the watercolor, but we'll come in on top of the work I've already done with this kind of bottle green I've got here. And if I put that in fairly loosely and lightly, and part of the reason I didn't want to come in with watercolor for the sky was obviously I wouldn't have the covering power that I need, but also because I've got my paper vertical, the watercolor is going to run down, which may still be a problem, but it's less of a problem when I'm painting the underneath of the lower part of the painting than if I was trying to paint above the animals. So I'm sticking with my big brush. And some of the texture that I've put down already, that's obviously still going to show through, but that's okay, because grass is obviously textured. Got a little bit of a wet spot there, so we'll just dive straight into that. It's amazing actually how often I find, well, I don't know if it's amazing, but I note that when letting watercolor dry, the entire painting will completely dry, and then there's one little tiny bit which just seems to hang on for hours on end. And I rarely have the patience to wait for things to completely dry. So I usually end up just using that bit of wet paint or mopping it up with a paper towel. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry again completely, and then we'll start to bring things to resolution. So I decided to add some more line work to this little cattle on the beach with a kite border painting. That's a sentence I haven't said too often in my life, but it may happen again. Anyway, so I'm coming in with my 0.1 millimeter nib unipin marker, just adding little bits of line work here and there on top of these soft washes that I've put down to just define things a little better, but trying to be fairly selective about that process. So I want to kind of keep the loose and raw nature of this little sketch because there's some sort of patterns and textures and brush marks that I really quite like. But you can see I've put some line work in to indicate some waves coming into shore, as mentioned earlier. And a moment ago, I also kind of thickened up the bulk of the body of the kite border. Now I'm coming in with a blue watercolor marker pen and then a little bit of an amber one as well. And just adding that on top of the cattle and the face of the guy. The blue on the white stripes come out a bit strong, but I'm going to use those same two colors of the watercolor marker for the kite as well. So I am referring to the reference now and coming in with a 7B pencil on top of the watercolor. So here's another watercolor and unipin marker line and wash capybaras painting. This one was actually created using Inktense watercolor, which is slightly more vibrant and is waterproof once dry. I decided to call this one Committee Meeting because I just think the three of them sort of sat round, and particularly the guy in the center there, I think he's sort of looking out at the viewer saying, when exactly is this meeting going to start? But I've got a busy schedule. So here's a close-up of the main character on the left, though. So quite a nice mix of colours and textures I think I've got on that one. And I like the shine on the nose as well, along the bridge of the nose. Here's another one. I think this is quite a sweet little image. This one's called There's Something in the Air, although I did debate, I did think I might call it Listen, Do You Smell Something? And if you can name which classic movie that's from, then you win a no prize, but you can leave that in the comments below if you'd like, if you happen to know which movie that line is from. Here's the people walking through the sky, and this one's simply called Walking Through the Sky. So another little surreal plein air study. Notice I've put the date at the base of the lamppost there. This one I called either Autumn Walk or A Walk in Autumn. I haven't quite decided yet, but it's going to be something along those lines. And then this one is probably going to be called either Skater Life or Skateboarding Life or something like that. So the idea would be that people would look and sort of think, well, you know, why is it called that? And then perhaps only later, a few seconds later, notice the cow on the skateboard. And then haven't come up with a name for the cattle on the beach with the kiteboarder yet, but I did tone down that blue on the white stripe of the main belted Galloway with a little bit of the 7B pencil that I used on the demo painting. And I think that works quite well. That's not a nice effect that I haven't tried before. Watercolor marker and then pencil on top. So I may return to that at some point. And then I also added in, just on the distant shore, a couple of tiny, tiny little cattle to add a sense of depth and space to the whole painting. And then here's the finished demo painting. And I decided, I think I'll call this one the Warriors 3, because I just kind of like the way they're sort of sat around. I think that works quite well. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you next Sunday for the next new episode of the Sunday Art Show. Thanks very much for watching.